Linguistic Variation and Age. Now, what role does age play in this variation of language use, and how is code switching different from code mixing in early bilingual stages? So yes, adult bilinguals do mix languages. We do that all the time. Rather, if I would ask you to even speak Urdu or your original language without code switching, it might be very difficult for you because we are so used to code switching. So it's a very much a norm in bilingual contexts. However, in adults, this code mixing or code switching, if you would like to call it, is very sophisticated and it is rule governed. For instance, if a child who just came back from, say, England said something like, my balloon is phat, you would find it very strange because your language or your code switching is following certain rules, and you can immediately tell what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And this sense of appropriacy, a correctness or incorrectness, emerges from a certain kind of rules which code switching is actually following. So what we are saying is that code mixing is actually strategic and strategically done by the adults. They use it, this code mixing, to achieve a number of communicative goals. They use it for emphasis. For instance, you might say you have to do it, so ये तुम्हें करना ही है. So you, for emphasis, you might actually move from one language to the other language. You might do it for role play. And this can be seen in terms of what Goffman says, impression management. You try to create a certain impression and then you code switch for whatever reasons. You might code switch to emphasize a certain socio-cultural identity. You meet somebody from your own ethnic background, you might like to sort of identify yourself with that community. And as I said before, in any case, this code mixing is always within certain socio-linguistic constraints. That is, you exactly understand when is it appropriate to code mix, in what context, what type of code mixing would be appropriate, speaking to who can you actually easily code mix, in what languages, and what is right within the given socio-cultural context. We have that kind of operational knowledge of code switching, which the children do not have, at least in the beginning. So we achieve a variety of communicative goals, keeping in mind, and let me remind you, we covered it before, also talking about setting the tone, the purpose, and of course the ethno-linguistic identity that we would like to emphasize. Now, these strategies, when you mix languages with these strategies, we usually refer it to code switching. Now, as I am saying it, please remember that in this paper that we are reading by Fred Genies, this is the interpretation that he is giving, and is explaining how he is using the word code mixing. However, there are researchers who, even for adult bilingualism, use the terms code mixing and code switching. So depending on whether it is code mixing within a sentence, or whether different whole chunks of sentences are used in one language followed by a chunk of sentences in the other language, they call it code mixing or code switching. In any case, if you would like to pick it up as a research topic, you just need to identify what do you mean by code switching. There are no right or wrong answers over here. That is why we at times switch between the two. Now, how are the children different? The children are different in systemicity. That is, they do not use very early, before the age of 3, they do not use any system to mix the two languages. So, language differentiation, Janice argues, comes at the age of 3, when a child is 3 years old. It is then that a child comes to understand that these are, or begins to understand that these are two different languages and what is correct or incorrect in a given situation. However, this kind of differentiation, it is argued, must have emerged after initial linguistic confusion. A child must have sort of like faced some sort of confusion from these two languages that are around him or her before he or she could make sense of them and begin to switch systematically. And we can tell that now a child is able to differentiate between different languages because the child now uses different languages for performing different functions, and they are sensitive towards who is speaking to them and or interacting with them, that is their interlocutors. So a child might speak to his or her maid in Urdu and might speak to you in English or in any regional language that you are using.